Hi. So I'd like to take you behind the scenes to show you a little bit how I've actually researched a project as massive as A Sense of Rebellion. Just to give you some context, I first started working on it in 2014. I've written my dissertation about one of the key protagonists of it in the meantime. And in this decade or so, I have amassed just a massive pile of interviews, videos, articles, snippets, screenshots, books, letters, diaries, you name it. So keeping track of all of this has been a challenge, and making sense of it even more so. And producing a podcast where you have to think in terms of audio and what kind of interview snippets you have and how to put all of this together has proved even a greater challenge than just writing it all up the way you would in a book or an academic article. So what I'd like to do today is to walk you through my use of two very nice and useful software packages. One is called Atlas.ti and the other one is called Scrivener. I'm not going to show you everything they're capable of. You'll find plenty of tutorials online, but I thought that to show you how I have used both would be very helpful, because I'm sure many of you are working on projects that have somewhat similar needs. So what you're looking at now is the final project of this podcast in Atlas.ti. Just to explain you what it is, essentially it's a software used by a lot of academics and social scientists to do qualitative research, where they conduct a lot of interviews, they have a lot of data that they need to, as the jargon puts it, code. And coding here doesn't have anything to do with computer science. It's basically just assigning metadata on interviews or any other text or materials that they have gathered, so that they will be able to generate this more complex and analytical picture from many of the snippets that they have accumulated during research. So for me, this podcast wasn't an academic exercise by any means, but it was a way, my use of Atlas.ti was a way to essentially keep track of everything and just build a very nice interface of accessing everything that I have processed and researched and found in a quick and easy way. Because ultimately, with so many interviews, you would very easily get lost in all the data that you have accumulated. So I will show you a couple of things that I have used Atlas.ti for. So let me open a transcript of an interview and show you what I've done with it. So as you see, looks like an audio file that's heavily annotated. That, of course, after I have worked on it. Once you import it, I'm not going to walk you through that process, but once you import an audio file, you just see nothing. You just see this typical visualization of audio. So what happens is that after I have conducted an interview with someone in person or using Zoom or Zencastr, I would run it through a service called Trint, where I would generate a transcript of it. You can do it in many other similar services. The transcript coming out of Trint will have timestamps on it. So I would be able to synchronize the transcript with the audio itself, which makes it extremely helpful. So I've already imported the transcript. So I will just show you what it essentially looks like once you synchronize them. What it means is that whenever I put my mouse in the audio, I can immediately see where we are on screen in terms of text. And the same thing applies to text. Wherever I put the mouse inside the transcript, I can see immediately the change reflected on screen. So basically, all you see in terms of these annotations, these are the so-called quotes that I mentioned before. So let's say I have found an element here, fragment, that I think might work as an interview quote in one of the episodes that I will be building later on. Let's say it's this particular fragment where I've just randomly put my mouse.
Brilliant. My mother was
So it was
brilliant. My
brilliant.
mother was
So,
brilliant. So
they really,
they really clicked.
Okay, so let's say I will just make it a little bit bigger. So let's say it starts somewhere here, this entire quote. So you see now I have created a new quotation inside the audio. I can rename it. I have my own system for renaming them. So I usually put the initials of the speaker, and I quickly summarize what the quote is about. She was talking about her mother, so I assume that's what it is. I can also then copy, this is kind of nerdy, but I will show you nonetheless. I then copy the text that belongs to that quote inside the transcript, and I post it as a comment inside each of these fragments. And you can see that I've already done it for everything else because I have already analyzed this interview. I will explain to you later why it matters, but our key goal here is to get everything kind of on the same playing field, and that playing field is text. So no matter what you process, images, videos, audios, you do want to have at least one field that contains all of that data rendered as text. And that's what we have just done, and I'll explain to you later why it matters. So now I can apply whatever code that I want, whatever code I want. So let's say it was about the father of this lady and her interaction with her mother. So I know who the father is. It's one of my protagonists, Warren Brody. So I can essentially use maybe one of my existing codes. So I already have a lot of, you see, even I have two-level codes. So I have something related to his biography marked by WB bio, which is that. And then I have a second-level code called parent. So let's say this refers to his parenting, but as it applied to the mother. So I can also put like spouse, and boom, we have a new code right there, right? And you see that it has appeared, and now I can actually go and look up everything in the future that I will be marking with this code. Let's say she was also commenting on something related to his identity, and I have also his character, and you see I can also already have a lot of codes related to it. Let's say it's about him open about his feelings. I can just select the code from here, or I can go through my whole list and select codes. So the idea is that you basically mark every interview fragment with codes that seem most relevant. Why do we need to do that? Well, very simple, because ultimately, first of all, you have the ability to then go and browse all of your quotes. So I think we called it something related to her mother. Yeah. So yeah, that's what on her mother. So I can actually search for the word mother, and it will search across all the 3,700 quotes that I have already extracted from interviews and other materials. So it makes it extremely easy to search inside for anything you want. If you want to search for parenting, I can see everything. I have nothing on parenting, but I will have something on parents, right? You can actually go and then play this interview snippets.
My father would talk about his
We can
experience.
do a lot of things. You also see the exact timestamps here where they appear. The same thing, by the way, applies to codes. So remember we were marking stuff with related to Warren Brody, the parent. So I can actually go and see what else do I have under, let's say, parent supportive. So then here you will see all the quotes throughout all the interviews and other materials that I have marked with code supportive whenever people were discussing his parenting skills.
So
Again,
when
I can go and listen to
when
this stuff.
a marriage place, and then he
So I have it all here. It's super easy. I can do more coding. I can recode it. I can remove codes. You see the text that I have added as comments to each quote. It appears here. So actually I have it as text. It's not just audio. But what's really cool is that I can actually export all of these items to Excel in essentially just a couple of clicks. So now you will see, this is what I got, like in seconds. So you got the quote ID, which is very important. You get the quote name, which is what I generate. I know what document it comes from. I know the actual comment, so I know what actually has been said. I have the codes, and I have, at some point, I have this at the timestamps, right? So this is super helpful. And I have this 12 codes that were listed under parent supported. Right. So again, in terms of finding information and finding stuff that you have annotated across here, I have 338 documents inside the system right now. Finding it otherwise would be very, very hard. And finding specific snippets, especially when you need to illustrate something. Atlas.ti does tons of other stuff. You can group codes into groups, for example. But again, I'm not going to go there because it's just super, super sophisticated and complicated. For example, here you see I have grouped, a lot of people talk about the lab in my podcast. There is this environmental ecology lab. And you see that here, for example, everything that has been said about its atmosphere, there have been 8 codes that I have created that discussed its atmosphere. And here are these codes. So there are phenomenological aspects, what it smelled like, what visitors said, what colors it had, that some people said it was club-like, right? And I have created a kind of a meta-level coding group or code group called Atmosphere, Lab Vibes Atmosphere, so that now all those code belong to it, and I can just click on the code group, and all this phenomenological stuff appears here. All this 37 elements or potential elements that I can be using later on. I have built, well, my developers, to whom I'm very grateful, have built a super helpful tool that essentially takes this data I've just shown you in Excel and it transforms it in Word. So I can also have all this data in a much more easier to manage, at least for me, format where I get the description of the quote, I have its name, and I have its quote ID, and I have the actual content of the quote posted automatically as comment. So imagine you can essentially get a completely different way. And again, this is one of these code groups, right? I will not be explaining to you everything, but here, if you look, lab problems to visionary, this is all this stuff which looks kind of complicated. For example, GES on challenges with computers. And here I have it much better in the text form, right? And here's that quote we were just looking at, GS on challenges with computers. And I actually know what was said. I have the content of the quote here, and I can work with it in Word without having to worry about Atlas.ti or Excel or anything else. And obviously, we can generate 100 of those files. It all depends on how many code groups we create. One last thing I wanted to show you about Atlas.ti is that, as I've mentioned, it works with everything. It doesn't need to be audio, video. It works just as well with text and with images and with snippets. So you see, I've done essentially the same thing with a lot of visual material I have clipped together from letters. I have a way to keep track of what letter it is. I mark the source, I mark who the letter is from and whom it is to. I know what archive it is, and I mark the date, for example. So, and I mark, of course, all of the other, I put all of the other codes that I would like to use here. And as before, I have pasted the text that I want. So in the end, everything ends up in Excel and I have the text fill, right? But just think about how cool it is that it's just so trivially easy to dump any kind of data you want here and annotate it. And then just to have a universal taxonomy across the whole project. And here you see even have patent information inside next to news clippings and stuff that I found in the archives. So I will not go into further detail about Atlas.ti. It does a lot of other stuff that is not particularly useful, or at least wasn't immediately useful to me while working on this podcast. You can do network visualizations. You can do all sorts of extra analytical tricks to help you better understand what it is that you're trying to say and what it is that's actually happening in your story or article or book. And what I'd like to show you now is what happens after I have systematized all my research and how to actually write an episode, for example, based on it. So I do most of my structuring in something called Scrivener. Those of you who have dabbled in novel writing or screenwriting, you probably know how it works. I mean, it's not, you can actually have templates for screenwriting too, but that's just the usual template, blank template, where you have a lot of this, flashcards, and every flashcard, you can title it any way you want. You can give it a different, you see, I have different colors referring to different storylines that either refer to characters or to important parts of the story. So I can change the color based on that. I can give it whatever name I want. I have a numbering system, which normally just refers to the order in which these beats appear. I can write anything I want here, and I can, of course, go inside each card and then write here whatever I want, right? And the beauty of this is that you can shift it any way you want. If you want to change the flow of your beats, all of that is very easy, and it doesn't take a lot of effort. Now, the cool part is that you can actually go inside every one of those and see that I have already done a lot of work. Obviously, that's one of the final versions of the structuring that happens. So let me just open something, let's say Strange Discovery, where I have a little bit more stuff, maybe this. So here you see I have a lot of stuff all about this other protagonist, Avery Johnson. And you can see that I have the quote ID. So if I now go to, you see it says KD on RAJ doorbell propeller. So if I go to my quotation manager and now in Atlas.ti and I just basically search for this quote, here it is.
On the house on Beacon Hill, the doorbell which clanged was the propeller of his private plane.
So you see it's super useful because I can immediately cross-reference them and go from Scrivener to Atlas.ti and immediately understand if this quote works in this context. But what it also does is that once I click through and I go inside the flashcard, I can actually read the quote, right? And since it comes from my Word files that I have just shown you before, so I just copy paste them there and it immediately recreates the structure of a Word document, right? So I can essentially plot inside every bit. I can structure bits any way I want. This you're looking at one of the early drafts of episode 2, but trust me, the same thing is happening in episode 3 and in episode 4 and in episode 5. I mean, it's all, it's like nice. Whatever you've done, you can mark as done. You can have your own status updates. Scrivener is really flexible in that regard. But the real fun starts once you use this cool feature called split screen. So you can, of course, work with flashcards on both, but what I normally do is that I actually write the episode in one of them. So let's say that here, let's say that this is blank and I start writing, and I just use the second part of the screen to understand what's the bit sequence, what's inside every bit. Let's say now I'm working on this part about the fight, and I have, it's one of the, they don't correspond to each other because one of them is newer, one of them is older. So here it's marked as 2.3, here is marked as 2.4. I can actually go inside and see what kind of quotes I can mobilize to make the case that I'm making. And I can just go and copy them here directly and, edit them or add quote ID, and quote ID is this part. Right, so it's super helpful, and having all the quotes inside Scrivener directly is also extremely helpful. So I will not show you the rest of Scrivener. You'll find plenty of tutorials online. The beauty of it is that it essentially allows you to map everything, structure everything, move things around. There are no costs of moving things. You can do as many experiments as you want. And everything is closely integrated. So once you have structured everything, once you have all of your quotes, you have all of your quote IDs, everything can be in Scrivener. And the only reason for you to leave Scrivener would be to go to Atlas.ti and to listen to some of these quotes. And that's it. And then at the end of the day, what happens is that, I don't know if you want to see this, but you can actually export all of this. I'm not even sure if you want to see it, but you can export all of these quotes, all 3,700 of them, into Excel, and then just have a massive Excel file which will have timestamps and everything else. And this is what you give to your audio editor, who then just opens every episode. They look what it is that you're using from every episode, and then they just make the cuts. So it significantly cuts down the work that your audio engineers have to spend on finding and locating the exact elements inside every audio file. So I hope that has been helpful. There are many other tricks, but I will limit myself here. Again, the combination of Atlas.ti and Scrivener has proved incredibly helpful. If you have some ability to do Python coding, you can then build all sorts of modifications, because ultimately once you have data coming out of Atlas.ti and Excel, you can transform it any way you want. So thank you so much, and I hope you listen to the podcast and just hear for yourself or see for yourself what beautiful product came out of all this pretty nerdy research endeavors.